Welcome back to the Motivated Mind Zone. Glad to have you here. Today, we are undertaking a really critical mission, I think. We're moving past that question we all ask ourselves, how much sleep do I need?
Right, which is always so frustratingly personal. It depends on so many things, genes, age, lifestyle.
Exactly. So instead of that, we're looking at something more universal. The profound, sometimes honestly weird consequences of what happens when you just don't get enough, whatever your enough is.
Hmm.
Our goal in this deep dive really is to unpack the science, the evidence that proves not getting enough sleep. It's way more than just feeling a bit groggy or needing extra coffee.
Definitely.
We've got source material here digging into, well, everything from immediate brain changes to long-term health links and even, high-stakes public safety stuff. It's all drawing from medical studies, public health data.
Solid stuff.
Yeah, we're basically going to show you how sleep deprivation fundamentally messes with who you are.
And that alteration, that's really the core idea from our sources, isn't it?
Yeah.
Society sometimes treats pulling an all-nighter like a badge of honor or, just a temporary drag.
Right, power through it.
Exactly. But the science is clear. Sleep is a non-negotiable biological need. And when you shortchange it, the stakes aren't just feeling tired. We're talking real biological impairment.
Impairment how?
It actually alters your physical systems, it shifts your emotional responses, how you react to things, and it degrades your ability to make complex decisions, to think clearly.
Okay, let's jump right into that then. Section 1, the immediate physical and emotional toll. Starting with two really basic human things, pain and feelings, how we process pain and how we respond to others.
And what's so striking is how fast the impact happens with pain sensitivity. Pain management is fundamental, right?
Yeah.
Basic survival stuff. Yet, losing sleep compromises it quickly, really quickly.
Yeah, that finding just leaped out at me from the sources. Sleep deprivation makes you dramatically more sensitive to physical pain.
It does.
There was this one key study, I think back in 2010, published in Sleep. It really nailed this down by looking at actual medication.
That's the one. They took participants, randomized them, standard practice, to get either codeine, which obviously helps with
A
pain,
known pain reliever, yeah.
or just a placebo. But crucially, they measured how sleepy people were leading up to the test. They wanted to see if fatigue changed, not just baseline pain, but how well the treatment worked.
Okay, so linking the sleepiness to the actual pain experience.
Exactly. And the results showed two key things. First, the participants who were objectively sleepy, their baseline pain sensitivity was already higher.
So things just hurt them more to begin with.
Correct. Their body's natural defenses against pain seemed lower. But the really surprising part, honestly, almost alarming.
What was that?
It was about the codeine. It worked significantly less effectively in the sleep-deprived group.
Wait, seriously? Being tired makes pain meds work less well?
That's what the data showed. You'd think a strong opioid could override feeling tired, right? But the lack of sleep actually seemed to undermine the drug's ability to, do its job at the receptor level or wherever.
Wow.
The biological impairment was so deep that even medication couldn't fully compensate.
That makes that whole idea of, sleeping away an injury feel like a real scientifically backed thing, not just an old wives' tale.
It really does. Sleep isn't just passive rest. It seems to be an active part of our pain management system. And we can even speculate a bit on the mechanism, if you want to get technical.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so the thinking is that sleep deprivation disrupts what are called the descending pain inhibitory pathways. These are systems in your brainstem sending signals down the spinal cord.
To do what?
To basically block or dampen pain signals before they even reach your conscious awareness. Kind of like a gatekeeper.
Okay.
When you're sleep deprived, that gate, it's left wide open. More pain signals get through.
That's a powerful image. Sleep controlling the pain gates. And you said this wasn't just one study.
No, definitely not. It was confirmed just a couple of years later, 2012. a separate, really tightly controlled study. They randomized volunteers again.
What was the setup this time?
This time, it was either maintain normal sleep or get extended sleep, extra sleep.
Ooh, lucky group.
Right, and they measured pain sensitivity again. The finding was totally clear. The group that got the extra rest, they showed reduced levels of pain sensitivity.
So getting more sleep actively raises your biological pain threshold.
It strongly suggests that, yes, which, think about it, matters hugely if you're dealing with chronic pain or maybe you're recovering from surgery. If your sleep is messed up, your recovery is likely to be harder, potentially more painful, regardless of the pills you take.
Okay, so that's the physical pain side, pretty stark. But let's pivot to the emotional side because this is where, for me, the consequences start feeling really social. You mentioned empathy.
Yes, this is critical. And there was a sophisticated study published just last year, actually, that gave us incredible detail on how sleep deprivation kind of blunts our empathy.
Blunts it. How did they measure that? Sounds tricky.
It is. They used 3 different groups. Group 1, totally sleep deprived, like pulled an all-nighter, 0 sleep.
Ouch.
Group 2 got to sleep normally. And both these groups were tested twice, once the night before and again the next morning. Then there was a third group, just a daytime control.
Okay. And measuring empathy. How'd they do that specifically?
They got really specific, moving beyond just asking people how they felt. They looked at 2 core types of empathy.
2 types?
Yeah. First was direct empathy. You could call it cognitive empathy or concern. It's how you feel about someone else's situation. Like, I feel sad that happened to them. It's compassion, understanding their perspective.
Got it. What's the second type?
The second was indirect empathy. This is more physiological or affective. It measures how someone else's situation physically affects you.
Like you actually feel something physically.
Exactly. They measured things like changes in heart rate, skin conductance, basically, your stress response kicking in because you saw someone else in distress, feeling nauseous, your heart racing, that kind of thing.
So they measured both the thinking part and the gut reaction part of empathy. Clever. What happened with the sleep-deprived group?
The result was, well, sobering is a good word, and unambiguous. The sleep-deprived group showed significantly less direct and indirect emotional empathy compared to both the normal sleepers and the control group.
Less of both. So less feeling for them and less feeling with them physically.
Pretty much. Their emotional response was just muted, flatlined almost across the board.
This is where, like you said, the deep dive gets its name. It's not just about being grumpy when you're tired. Sleep loss makes us measurably less able to even register, let alone process the emotional state of people around us.
We become emotionally blunted.
And is there a brain reason for this? Did the sources touch on the neurology?
They did, and it aligns perfectly. Brain imaging studies, fMRI and such, often show that when people are sleep deprived, there's reduced functional connectivity. Meaning the different parts of the brain aren't talking to each other as effectively. Specifically, the connection weakens between the amygdala, that's our main emotional processing hub.
Right, the fear center and all that.
Yeah, that area. And the prefrontal cortex. That's the part responsible for rational thought, control, putting things in context.
So the emotion signal arrives in the amygdala.
Right. But the part of the brain that should be saying, okay, let's process this, understand it, generate a compassionate response.
Yeah.
It's struggling to get the message. The whole system is sluggish, out of sync.
Okay, let's translate that for, real world interactions. If you're chronically tired, maybe stressed, it's not that you suddenly become a bad person who doesn't care.
No, not inherently.
It's that your brain is literally putting the brakes on your ability to fully connect and feel with someone else.
That seems to be what the science suggests. And think about the implications. High-stress jobs like healthcare, teaching, caregiving, even just maintaining healthy personal relationships.
Yeah, it could create a really vicious cycle, couldn't it? You need empathy to smooth over friction or resolve conflict.
Absolutely.
But the conflict causes stress, which hurts your sleep. Then you go into the next interaction already sleep deprived, and your empathy toolkit is diminished.
Precisely. Making resolution harder, potentially causing more stress, worse sleep, and on it goes.
Okay, so those are some pretty immediate, measurable hits to pain and emotion. We need to talk about the long-term stuff too, but you mentioned a caveat here.
A big one, yeah. When we talk long-term health associations, we have to be really careful. Conducting controlled trials is basically impossible.
Why is that?
Ethics, mainly.
Yeah.
You can't ethically take a group of people and deliberately deprive them of sleep for months or years just to see if they develop, say, diabetes.
Right. Of course not.
Hmm.
So how do we know about long-term links?
We rely on large-scale cohort studies. These track huge numbers of people over long periods looking for correlations. And what these big data sets consistently show is a strong association.
An association between what?
Between chronic sleep deprivation, people who consistently get too little sleep, and serious long-term health problems like type 2 diabetes and obesity.
Okay, strong association. But you said be careful?
Yes, because association isn't causation. This is crucial. We can't definitively say, based on these studies, that poor sleep causes diabetes or obesity.
Why not? What else could be going on?
Well, the causal arrow could point the other way,
Yeah.
right? Maybe having diabetes or obesity causes discomfort, pain, or breathing issues that lead to poor sleep.
Ah, okay, chicken and egg.
Exactly. Or there could be a third factor involved. Maybe high stress levels contribute to both poor sleep and weight gain, or socioeconomic factors influencing diet, stress, and sleep opportunities. It's complex.
Nailing down direct causation in humans for lifestyle stuff is always tricky.
It really is. We can't isolate just sleep duration from diet, exercise, stress, all those intertwined factors.
Got it. Important nuance. But even if sleep isn't the single smoking gun cause, it seems like it's definitely a major stressor on the system, right? Do the sources suggest how it might link to metabolism?
Absolutely. There's a very plausible biological link, and it revolves around hormones, specifically hormones that regulate appetite.
Okay, which hormones?
Two key ones, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is often called the hunger hormone. It signals your brain that it's time to eat.
Right, and leptin.
Leptin is the satiety hormone. It signals fullness, tells your brain you've had enough.
So hunger signal, fullness signal. How does sleep deprivation mess with them?
It throws the balance completely off, and in the worst way possible for weight management.
How so?
Studies show that when people are sleep deprived, their levels of ghrelin, the hunger signal, go up.
So you feel hungrier?
Yes. And at the same time, their levels of leptin, the fullness signal, go down.
Oh. So you feel hungrier and less satisfied when you do eat.
Exactly. It's a double whammy. It encourages you to eat more and makes it harder to feel full. This directly contributes to overeating, potential weight gain.
And puts massive stress on your whole metabolic system.
Precisely. Which provides that strong biological pathway linking chronic sleep debt to the higher rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes we see in those large cohort studies. Lack of sleep pushes the body into a state of sort of chronic metabolic confusion.
Okay, that connects the dots pretty clearly from the immediate effects to potential long-term illness. It's all tied to a system under stress. Which leads us perfectly into section 2. Sleep and performance. If it messes with pain, empathy, and metabolism, what does it do to your ability to learn, to motivate yourself, to actually achieve things?
And this is where the impact becomes incredibly visible, especially when we look at education kids, teens, college students.
Yeah, studying kids and sleep must be tough, though. Like you said, with the long-term stuff, you can't exactly control their whole lives.
It is challenging, absolutely. They have to go to school, deal with schedules. You can't fully manipulate their environment like in a lab.
So what do we know?
We rely a lot on comparative studies again. And over the last decade, these have been remarkably consistent.
About what?
Well, kids who are identified as chronically sleep deprived getting consistently less sleep than they need are significantly more likely to also be diagnosed with depression and anxiety.
That's a huge finding in itself. Poor mood makes everything harder, especially learning.
Absolutely. It creates this negative feedback loop. And we also have specific recent data connecting insufficient sleep directly to measurable academic failure.
Like lower grades.
Yes. There's a study just last year out of Korea, looked at over 100 adolescents. They specifically compared kids with normal sleep habits to kids diagnosed with something called behaviorally induced insufficient sleep syndrome.
Which basically means...
It basically means chronic sleep debt that's self-imposed due to lifestyle, habits, schedules, not due to an underlying medical sleep disorder.
Okay, so what did they find comparing those groups?
The results were crystal clear. The kids with insufficient sleep showed significantly worse academic performance, lower grades, poorer scores on standardized tests. The works.
And this wasn't just one study showing this, right?
Oh no. This finding holds true across the board, middle school, high school, university level. Study after study confirms it. You could argue that sleep deprivation is maybe the single biggest modifiable barrier to academic success that students face today.
Modifiable being the key word there, but it's not just about remembering facts for a test, is it? We talked about the brain being sluggish. Does it affect, like, willpower, motivation?
That's a fantastic question, and yes, it absolutely seems to. It goes beyond just cognitive ability like memory or attention and hits motivation and effort.
How do we know that? Are there studies that measure effort?
There are, and the results are, frankly, a bit depressing. There was a notable college study back in 2003 published in the Journal of Sleep Research.
What did they do?
They took about 50 healthy college students, had them experience two conditions: one night of normal sleep and one night where they were sleep deprived.
Okay, standard comparison.
Then they gave them math tasks. But here's the clever part. The tasks were designed so the students had to actively choose how much effort they wanted to put in. They could pick easier tasks or harder tasks.
Ah, so they were measuring the choice to exert effort, not just the ability.
Exactly. And the finding wasn't just that the sleep-deprived students were maybe slower or made more mistakes on the hard tasks, which they probably were.
Right.
The critical finding was psychological. The students who were sleep-deprived were significantly more likely to choose the easier tasks. They showed less overall effort in their selections.
Wow, so they just opted for the easier path more often when tired?
It appears so.
Yeah.
It shifts the focus from just, I can't do this well, to, I don't even want to try the hard thing.
Like a kind of motivational fatigue?
That's a great way to put it. Decision-making fatigue. The cognitive energy needed to gear up for a challenge, to push yourself. It seems like that energy is just depleted when your brain's running on empty, so you default to the path of least resistance.
But couldn't that just look like less effort? Because the hard task feels overwhelming when you're tired? Maybe it's a rational choice. I know I can't do that well, so I'll do the easy one. Is it really a loss of willpower or just cognitive overload?
That's a fair point, a good distinction to make. But the effect seems to go deeper, impacting actual self-belief, which suggests it's more than just a cold calculation of difficulty.
How so?
Well, there was another study, 2010 I think, focused specifically on female athletes.
Okay.
It found that when these highly capable athletes were sleep deprived, they were markedly less likely to express confidence in their own ability to succeed at challenging tasks. They literally believed in themselves less.
So it wasn't just that the task seemed harder, they felt less capable of tackling it.
Exactly. So when you put those two findings together, the tendency to choose less effortful tasks and this diminished self-belief,
Yeah.
the implication is pretty profound, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that not getting enough sleep actively strips young people of the psychological fuel they need to challenge themselves, to strive, to push their boundaries, and get better.
They basically opt out of opportunities for growth because they feel less able, and the effort feels too high when their biologically exhausted.
That seemed to be the picture the research paints.
Okay, so if we wrap up this section, we're looking at potentially a whole generation of students who aren't just struggling academically because they're tired.
Right.
They're also potentially choosing easier paths more often and losing faith in their own potential to tackle hard things, all linked back to chronic sleep debt.
That's a worrying combination.
Which brings us right to section 3, the societal cost. Because if sleep is this crucial for performance, motivation, and even self-belief, why does it feel like society, especially for teenagers, is actively working against them getting enough?
Yeah, there's a really strong consensus building among scientists, pediatricians, advocacy groups, all pointing to the same conclusion, backed by the data we just discussed. Society, largely through school schedules, is structurally setting teenagers up for failure.
How specifically?
Well, we know adolescents have a natural shift in their internal clock, their circadian rhythm. It's called a phase delay. They just don't naturally get sleepy until 11 p.m. or even later.
Right, they're biologically programmed to be night owls during those years.
Exactly. And biologically, they still need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep per night to be fully rested and functional.
Okay, 9 to 10 hours starting at 11 p.m. or later. You can see the problem immediately with early school start times.
Right. The math just doesn't work. I remember you mentioning seeing high schoolers waiting for the bus at, 6:45 a.m.?
Yeah, pitch black in the winter.
Okay, so for that kid to get even the minimum 9 hours, they need to be sound asleep by 9:45 p.m. To get 10 hours, asleep by 8:45 p.m.
Which is completely unrealistic for most teenagers. Biologically, they're wide awake then. And socially, forget it. Homework, sports, dinner, maybe seeing friends. 8:45 p.m. bedtime is just not happening.
It's fundamentally incompatible with their biology and the demands placed on them. We're forcing them into an impossible schedule, guaranteeing sleep deprivation.
Which is why there's been such a push for change, right? Advocacy groups.
Yes, organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics have been very vocal. They've formally recommended that middle and high school should start no earlier than 8:30 a.m.
8:30 a.m. minimum. Why?
Because starting earlier forces teens to wake up and try to learn when their brains are often still producing high levels of melatonin, the sleep hormone. There's just no physiological or educational justification for those super early starts.
And we know how prevalent those early starts are.
Oh, yeah. Data shows over 40% of U.S. high schools start before 8:00 a.m., cementing that sleep deficit right into the system.
But is there evidence that changing start times actually works? That it makes a difference?
Absolutely. This isn't just theory. There's fantastic data from the Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement. It's part of the University of Minnesota.
What do they find?
They looked directly at school districts that did change their start times, and the results were dramatic.
How so?
In districts where high school started early, say 7:30 a.m., they found only about 1/3 of the students were managing to get at least 8 hours of sleep.
Wow, so 2/3 were sleep deprived by that measure.
A massive built-in sleep debt for the majority of students. But then they looked at districts that pushed start times back, closer to 9:00 a.m.
Yeah.
The proportion of kids getting at least 8 hours of sleep, it shot up to 2/3.
It doubled, just from changing the start time by maybe an hour and a half?
Exactly. That relatively simple policy change, letting teens sleep closer to their natural schedule, doubled the number getting adequate rest.
That's incredible. Were there other benefits besides just more sleep?
Yes, the sources are clear on this too. Those schools also reported better attendance rates, fewer students reporting symptoms of depression, and, crucially, improvements in academic performance, better grades, better test scores.
So, connecting the dots here. Later start times aren't just about convenience.
Not at all. It's a direct public health intervention. It takes all the research we've been talking about, the link between sleep and mood, effort, academic outcomes, and translates it into real, positive change for students' health, well-being, and learning.
When we ignore the biology and stick with those early starts, we're basically choosing to accept all those negative consequences we've outlined.
That's the reality, yes.
And unfortunately, poor academic performance and low motivation aren't even the most severe consequences of widespread sleep debt. Which brings us to Section 4, the high-stakes consequences. This is where sleep deprivation moves from a personal or academic problem to a major public safety hazard.
Yeah, this is where things get really serious. The collective sleep debt in society translates directly into danger, especially on our roads.
Lots and lots of car accidents, right? The sources were pretty blunt about that.
Extremely blunt, and the statistics are truly staggering. This isn't just a minor issue of a few people dozing off occasionally.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Okay, get this. According to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, every single day in the U.S., more than 80,000 people report falling asleep at the wheel, even if just for a moment, nodding off.
80,000 daily. That's terrifying. A huge number of potential accidents waiting to happen every day.
It is. And those daily near misses, or actual microsleeps, translate into a massive annual toll. Estimates suggest over 250,000 motor vehicle accidents each year are directly related to driver sleepiness.
250,000 accidents just from being too tired to drive safely.
And it gets worse. When researchers analyze the causes of serious injuries from car crashes, they estimate that around 20%, one-fifth, are linked to driver fatigue or sleep issues.
1 in 5 serious injuries because someone was too tired. That's preventable harm on a massive scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, sleep deprivation doesn't just cause impairment on its own. It acts like a massive multiplier for other risks.
Like alcohol.
Exactly. If someone is already sleep deprived, even a small amount of alcohol, an amount that might normally be below the legal limit or seem insignificant, can impair their reaction time and judgment far, far more drastically than either fatigue or alcohol would alone. It's a dangerous combination.
So the risk isn't just additive, it's exponential.
It really seems to be. But the danger isn't just limited to everyday drivers on the highway. The same pattern holds true for highly skilled professionals in high-stakes environments.
Where mistakes have even bigger consequences.
Precisely. The sources cite parallel findings. Sleep deprivation causes significant errors in performance among people whose jobs require incredible precision and focus.
Like who?
Well, examples include astronauts on long missions, airline pilots dealing with complex flight controls and long hours, and crucially, physicians, especially doctors in training, who historically worked incredibly long shifts.
So even for these highly trained, highly motivated professionals, the basic biological need for sleep overrides their skill or training if they're too fatigued.
It seems so. The complexity of the task doesn't make you immune. A tired surgeon's hands might not be as steady. A fatigued air traffic controller might miss a critical detail. Statistically, they become more dangerous.
Which is why we have regulations now, right? For pilots, at least.
Exactly. Because the risk is so well documented and the consequences so severe, there are strict regulations, often called duty hour limits, that dictate how many hours pilots can work consecutively and how much rest they must have between shifts.
To prevent fatigue-related errors.
Yes. And significantly, that regulatory approach eventually caught up with the medical field, too. For decades, it was almost a rite of passage for medical residents to work 30-hour shifts, or even longer.
Yeah, that was legendary.
But the evidence linking that extreme fatigue to medical errors just became too overwhelming to ignore. So, recent regulations have put similar strict limits on resident work hours, capping consecutive hours and weekly totals.
To protect patients from mistakes made by exhausted doctors.
Fundamentally, yes. And that policy shift really underscores the core message of this entire deep dives, doesn't it?
How so?
The sources show us unequivocally that when people, whether they're students trying to learn, drivers on the road, or highly skilled professionals doing critical jobs, work too much and get too little sleep, the system breaks down.
Performance drops, empathy fades, motivation wanes.
And accidents happen, critical errors are made. And the ultimate tragic cost is that sometimes these failures cost people their lives. Sleep deprivation isn't just feeling tired. It has real, serious, sometimes fatal consequences.
Okay, let's try and synthesize all of this. We've covered a lot of ground. What are the main takeaways for you listening to
Yeah,
this?
let's pull it together.
First, sleep loss isn't just a temporary inconvenience you can push through. It's a measurable systemic deficit. It hits basic functions hard.
Right. We saw the biological stress, messed up pain tolerance, wacky appetite hormones like ghrelin and leptin, potentially linking to long-term metabolic issues.
Then the psychological hits, that measurable drop in empathy, both feeling for others and feeling with them. And that reduced motivation, the tendency to shy away from effort and challenge.
Which then connects to the societal level. When our institutions, like schools with early start times or workplaces with demanding schedules, ignore this fundamental need for rest.
We see the costs pile up. Correlations with chronic disease, clear drops in academic achievement, and tragically preventable accidents and errors in critical situations.
But the flip side is also clear from the research, right? Simple changes, like adjusting school start times or implementing sensible work hour limits, can yield dramatic improvements.
Yeah.
More rest, better performance, increased safety. The blueprint is there.
We've spent this whole deep dive laying out the immediate, measurable harm caused by sleep debt based on the science.
And I want to leave you with maybe one final, more provocative thought. It builds on something we touched on earlier, the difficulty of doing those really long-term studies.
Right, the ethical impossibility of deliberately sleep depriving people for months or years.
Exactly. So we mainly have data on the immediate damage from a few bad nights and these long-term correlations. We don't have experimental proof of the chronic effects of, say, moderate but sustained sleep debt over decades.
Okay, so what's the provocative thought?
Well, think about what we do know experimentally. Even short-term sleep deprivation demonstrably impairs empathy. It reduces willingness to exert effort. It makes us more pain-sensitive, more irritable, less rational.
Yeah.
And we know it's strongly associated with major chronic diseases. So the question is, how much of the background noise of modern life, the social friction, the generalized impatience, maybe our blunted reactions to large-scale problems, the sheer prevalence of public health issues like obesity and diabetes, how much of that could be subtly, quietly exacerbated by a widespread, chronic, collective sleep debt?
Like a hidden tax on our society's well-being and functioning.
Exactly. What other ethical or societal consequences might we uncover if we could somehow ethically study the effects of just consistently getting maybe 6 hours instead of 8, year after year after year? We focus on the acute all-nighter, but maybe the real damage is in that chronic, low-grade deprivation that so many people experience.
It's a pervasive, almost invisible stressor that could be costing us way more than we realize.
That's the thought I want to leave you with. The potential cumulative cost might be enormous.
Absolutely. Something profound to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today on the Motivated Mind Zone.